Bound by marital vows for 7 years and sharing companionship for a decade, I am 37, and she is 32. Until recently, our wedded life had been nothing short of remarkable. The occasional arguments were minor blips in our otherwise affectionate, satisfying, and joy-filled union. Our intimate life was less frequent than in our early days, but still healthy and lively. My wife was everything I had ever dreamed of: intelligent, humorous, and stunning. I found immense satisfaction in the life I was able to provide for us. While my job demanded 40 to 60 hours per week, she pursued her passions as a part-time professor at a local community college and a yoga instructor. However, my world collapsed around me 4 months ago when, in a moment of curiosity, I happened to go through her emails. A conversation with an unfamiliar male name caught my attention. The thread was filled with explicit exchanges, including the man emailing my wife explicit videos of their illicit affair. My emotions surged like a storm, with shock and anger being the predominant forces. With hours before her return home, I used the time to collect myself and plan my next steps. The videos were like a haunting echo playing over and over in my head, shattering my faith in the life we had worked so hard to build together. I prepared to confront her, intending to leave for the night to process the crushing reality on my own. Upon her return, I confronted her with the undeniable evidence, and she immediately broke down, tears streaming down her face, as she admitted her indiscretion and apologized profusely. My anger reached its peak, and I informed her of my decision to leave. For a while, her sobs grew louder. Pleas for my stay echoed in the room. Throughout my stay with my brothers, she continued to reach out and express her love and remorse. After 2 weeks, I found myself missing her, which prompted me to return home and attempt reconciliation. Each time I questioned her actions, I was met with the same vague answers. The man was a 27-year-old professor who had recently joined her department, and she vowed to regain my trust by proposing a series of measures, including cutting off all contact with the man who changed jobs, allowing me to monitor her location and access her emails, taking an STD test, and seeking professional counseling. Her deep remorse was evident, and her commitment to our reconciliation was unwavering. She kept her promises and was genuinely grateful for the second chance, making her a joy to be around. But despite our progress, the damage was done. The memories of her affair, especially the explicit videos, were a constant source of agony, humiliation, and embarrassment. The resentment toward my wife was immense and hindered our progress. Their intimate relationship was unprotected. The man is well endowed. She seemed to enjoy their encounters more, wearing new lingerie and participating in acts that she had previously found distasteful in our relationship. Her enthusiasm for him was noticeably higher, even to the point of participating in acts. To my dismay and confusion, we had never thought much about it. My attempts to understand why she would engage in these acts with him, when she refused to do so with me, were always met with "I don't know." My self-esteem plummeted. The haunting images of their encounters served as cruel reminders of my perceived inadequacies. Our intimacy suffered. My mind was constantly plagued by the thought that I might not have been enough for her. The aftermath of my wife's infidelity was a festering wound. Our efforts at reconciliation were merely an attempt to mend a fabric that had been torn beyond repair. The memories of the affair. The explicit videos were deeply etched in my mind, each detail causing fresh pain. My resentment toward my wife grew. The trust I had placed in her had been irrevocably shattered. I was caught in a vortex of humiliation and embarrassment. The moments she shared with the other man were too graphic and explicit, moments she had never shared with me. It was a cruel reminder of my perceived inadequacies, and my self-esteem plummeted. Her enthusiastic encounters, her apparent enjoyment, and her participation in acts she had previously found distasteful in our relationship only fueled my sense of betrayal. As days turned into weeks, my feelings of betrayal turned into a desire for retribution. If her AP was capable of destroying our lives without remorse, then he deserved to feel the consequences of his actions. The thought of vengeance began to consume me. I had full access to my wife's email as part of her attempt to regain my trust. Among her emails, I found more explicit videos of their affair. Each was a damning piece of evidence against the man. An idea began to form in my mind, a plan that would expose the professor for what he really was. I began meticulously extracting all of the videos from her email and storing them in a separate, secure location. I continued to research the man, learning about his personal and professional life. I discovered he was married. His actions had not only violated my marriage, but his own as well. The time for revenge was at hand. I began to compile a list of contacts that included the professor's students, his colleagues at the university, and most importantly, his wife. Each person on this list would receive an email, an unfiltered glimpse into the man's true character. The process of preparing my retaliation was painstaking. I created an anonymous email account to ensure it couldn't be traced back to me. I began drafting the email, making sure that my words were as cutting as the evidence I was about to present. As the days passed, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I was no longer a victim, but a man reclaiming his dignity. Each recipient received the videos and a detailed account of the professor's affair with my wife immediately after my retaliation. The response was swift, brutal, and far-reaching. The emails, with their luridly explicit content, spread through the university faster than a wildfire on a dry California day, setting off a chain reaction within the academic community that was astonishing to behold. The ripples of shock and disbelief began to spread outward from the heart of the scandal, touching everyone in their path and leaving them in a state of stunned disbelief. The professor, once a respected academic authority, found himself suspended pending an investigation. His reputation, carefully built over years of dedicated service and perceived integrity, was now tarnished beyond recognition, as he faced allegations of immoral behavior that eclipsed his previous accomplishments and thrust him into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. A man who had been trusted to lead and educate the next generation was now seen as a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The students who once looked up to him turned against him, their respect and admiration replaced by a deep-seated disgust and sense of betrayal. They protested his presence, refused to attend his lectures, and demanded his expulsion. Some even went so far as to boycott his classes altogether, while others took to social media to express their anger and disgust. The man's colleagues were no less merciful. They distanced themselves from him, their faces reflecting their disgust and disapproval. The academic community is a close-knit one, and the shock waves of his misconduct spread quickly. His office became a den of pariahs, and colleagues avoided him like the plague. The camaraderie once shared was replaced by cold shoulders and averted eyes. Some of his fellow educators, in a spectacular display of public shaming, projected the explicit videos on the big screen in the lecture hall, ensuring that the man's disgrace was on display for all to see. The fallout was not limited to his professional life. In his personal life, the professor was met with shock, anger, and betrayal. His wife, a woman who had stood by him through thick and thin, was devastated. She filed for divorce. Unable to bear the weight of his betrayal, the circle of friends they had so lovingly built over the years quickly rallied to her side. The professor's home, once filled with love and laughter, now echoed with the sounds of recrimination and heartbreak. His actions had not only destroyed my marriage, but his own as well. Meanwhile, my wife was completely blindsided by my actions. I had not informed her of my plans in order to protect her from the inevitable backlash. When the email surfaced, she was as surprised as everyone else, perhaps more so, as she grappled with the enormity of what she had done. I watched from the sidelines, my heart heavy with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of satisfaction. Her remorse, which had once been a hollow echo of regret, was now a deep, gut-wrenching understanding of the damage she had caused. The tears she shed were no longer for herself, but for the pain and humiliation she had caused me. She began to see the full extent of her actions, the ripple effect they had caused, and the devastation left in their wake. In the weeks that followed, I made the decision to file for divorce. She pleaded for another chance and promised to change to make amends. But the trust that had once been the bedrock of our relationship was now gone, replaced by a deep-seated resentment that no amount of remorse could erase. The divorce proceedings were a stark, painful reminder of the love that had once blossomed between us. As I watched her across the room, I saw not the woman I had fallen in love with, not the woman I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with, but a stranger. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for the woman she had become, but for the woman she had once been, the woman who had filled my days with laughter and my nights with warmth, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant, my best friend, the woman who was now a ghost, a painful echo of the past. In the end, I left with a heavy heart. Our marriage was over, reduced to a pile of divorce papers and a string of broken promises, but as I left the courtroom, I realized that I was also leaving with my dignity intact. I was no longer just the man who had been betrayed, but the man who had stood up to betrayal. I had exposed the man who had wronged me, and I had held my wife accountable for her actions. The months that followed were a time of healing and self-discovery. I sought therapy to deal with the emotional turmoil and to work through my feelings of betrayal, humiliation, and inadequacy. I reconnected with old friends and found comfort and understanding in their company. I threw myself into my work, finding a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment in my professional accomplishments. Slowly but surely, I turned my focus inward, embarking on a journey of self-discovery that was as enlightening as it was painful. I began to realize that my worth was not defined by my wife's actions, but by my own. I was not the man my wife's infidelity had led me to believe I was. I was not inadequate. I was not inadequate. I was worthy of love, respect, and loyalty. The haunting images of the affair that had once consumed my every waking moment gradually lost their power over me. They were replaced by a newfound sense of self-worth, a sense of self-respect that was stronger than any blow my wife's betrayal could ever deliver. In the end, I emerged stronger, more resilient. I was a man who had faced the worst kind of betrayal and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but unbowed. I had regained my dignity and self-respect and proved to myself that I was enough. I was not just a survivor of infidelity, but a man who had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for personal growth and self-discovery. I had faced the specter of betrayal and not let it break me. Life after divorce was a strange new reality for me to navigate. My home, once filled with shared memories and laughter, now echoed with silence. It was a stark reminder of the void her absence had left, but in that silence I found a space to heal, to reflect, and to grow. I developed a routine and found comfort in the predictability and stability it provided. I began to take better care of myself, both physically and emotionally. I took up new hobbies, rekindled old passions, and rediscovered parts of myself that had been lost in the turmoil of my marriage. As I embarked on this new chapter of my life, I also sought solace in my work. My career, once a means to an end, became a source of fulfillment. I immersed myself in my research and found a sense of purpose and accomplishment that I had not felt in a long time. My colleagues noticed the change in me, their respect for my resilience and determination contributing to my growing sense of self-worth. Second story. It's a strange feeling to look back and know that the girl I played tag with in the park would one day become the woman I would marry, and ultimately the woman who would break my heart into a million pieces. We were best friends who blossomed into lovers, and by the time we were 18, we were inseparable. Smitten doesn't even begin to describe it. We were magnetically drawn to each other, and the intensity of our feelings was so intense that it seemed inevitable that we'd end up together. So when I popped the question on a romantic Valentine's Day getaway at the age of 21, it was just a formality. We both knew it was meant to be. Our life together was wonderfully mundane. We both had respectable jobs, maintained a comfortable and immaculately kept home, and were surrounded by a warm and supportive circle of friends and family. It was the kind of life you see in picture-perfect Instagram posts, but it was ours, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world. But I would soon discover that perfect was just an illusion. The first cracks in our seemingly flawless relationship appeared when I stumbled upon a string of texts on her phone from a coworker. There was no explicit flirting, but there was an undercurrent of something that tugged at my gut. The messages were suggestive, bordering on inappropriate, and it set off alarm bells in my head, fueled by a potent mix of fear and anger. I confronted her and demanded that she cut off all contact with him. She complied and blocked him right in front of me. I thought that was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Fast forward to one fateful Sunday night, I was co-owning a thriving business with my cousin, a business we had poured our blood, sweat, and tears into since we were 20 years old. The workload was often intense, and on those nights I chose to sleep in the office. This night was one of those nights, or at least it was supposed to be. I texted my wife around noon, letting her know that I'd be working late and that she shouldn't wait up for me. She replied within minutes, expressing disappointment, but understanding and assuring me of her love. Little did I know that her words would soon be rendered hollow later that evening around 7 p.m. I decided to surprise them by coming home early as I entered our house. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I heard muffled voices from upstairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last, and then I saw them, my wife and the man from the text messages. Their bodies entwined in a tableau of betrayal that consumed me. I lunged at the man, my fist connecting with his face before he even had a chance to apologize. I threw him out of our house, leaving him shoeless and defeated. My wife, on the other hand, was a sobbing mess, begging for forgiveness and making excuses that fell on deaf ears. I didn't have the energy or inclination to listen. Instead, I told her to pack her bags and get out of my sight. After the confrontation, my phone was flooded with calls and messages from her friends and family, which I ignored. The only person I spoke to was her father, who was as angry as I was and surprisingly sided with me. But despite the support, I felt a deep sense of loss. The woman I had loved for most of my life had thrown away everything we had built for a sleazy affair with a coworker. The realization was like a punch in the gut, and the reality of her infidelity left me reeling. Our dreams together crumbled like a sand castle at high tide. She had broken our sacred bond, and the love I had for her was now tainted with the bitter taste of betrayal. As I watched her pack her belongings, her sobs echoing off the walls of our once happy home, I felt a surge of resentment and hurt. I had loved her with all my heart, but now all I felt was a hollow emptiness where that love used to be with each item she placed in her suitcase. It felt like another piece of our shared past was being erased. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. I had hired a divorce attorney, a stern but compassionate man who assured me he would take care of everything. We discussed our shared assets, our financial obligations, and the possibility of alimony. Every document signed was a stark reminder of the impending finality of our relationship. It was a difficult time, but the thought of being legally free of her and the pain she had caused me drove me forward. Weeks later, just as I was beginning to find some semblance of peace, she appeared on my doorstep. Her face pale and her eyes wide with fear that she was pregnant. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. The possibility that I might be the father of her child sent a jolt of panic through me. I demanded a DNA test and refused to accept the child as mine until I had irrefutable proof. The process was more complicated than I had expected. The prenatal paternity test involved taking blood from her and the fetus to compare DNA. It was the wait of a few weeks filled with anxiety, resentment, and a strange sense of hope. But when the results came in, it was like a punch in the gut. The child was not mine. The truth of her pregnancy added another layer of complication to an already painful situation. The man she was having an affair with, the biological father of her child, was married and his wife was expecting. He had made it clear that he had no intention of leaving his wife for her. Watching her realize the magnitude of her mistakes was a place that evoked a myriad of emotions in me. There was a part of me that felt satisfaction in seeing her face the consequences of her actions, but there was also a part that felt pity. She had made her choices, and now she was left alone, pregnant with a child conceived through an affair. As she left my home for what I hoped would be the last time, I felt a strange sense of relief. The woman I had loved and lost was now just a painful chapter in my life, a chapter that had ended and left me free to begin anew. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had to move forward, leaving the past and its painful memories behind. The future held possibilities, and despite the pain, I was ready to explore them, to rebuild my life from the ruins of a love that had once meant everything to me.